Welcome back to another episode of the Better Than I Found It podcast. This is Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor, and your host today. Today's episode is part 2 of the John Smith interview. John Smith, who's considered by most to be the greatest American wrestler of all times, is also the coach at Oklahoma State University and has been since 1992. In part 1, John spoke of his years as an athlete, as the world's greatest wrestler, and the mindset that he created that allowed him to achieve those accomplishments. Today, he will focus on John Smith, the wrestling coach. John has a very unique approach and is just, quite frankly, one of my all-time favorite athletes and coaches. I hope you enjoy. You became the coach at Oklahoma State sort of overnight, and something changed right there, and it had to change. And I read this in the book Cowboy Up, where you said all of a sudden it went from me being the show and it was all about me. Now I had to flip gears and actually pour into my student athletes. So talk about the transition into becoming a coach. And then I've got some things I want to ask you about coaching.
Yeah, just, it was really rough. You come back from your second gold medal and you retire, and literally a week later, you're named head coach. And I wanted that. That's not something that I didn't want. This was something I was planning on doing. I always wanted to coach. And so I just jumped in it and realized this is what I need to do, and of course, our program at the time was in some trouble. And so maybe helping pick up the pieces was real important. It was important to me because it was the program I came from. And so as I got into it, like you said, I realized real quickly I was treating it like it's still about me a little bit, and when you're an individual athlete and you're training on your own, you're performing on your own, you're doing a lot of things on your own, you realize it is about you, and it's about my performance. When we're in individual sports like golf and like wrestling, it is about your performance. It's about me. It's about me. I don't have to rely on several people to help me win, So I just real quickly realized that you get in a tunnel vision where you're really self-centered, and in coaching, it's just the opposite, and it took me almost 2 or 3 years to realize this. And I almost quit. Now, I didn't said this to too many people, but I looked at it and I really thought, I don't know if I can do this, and I darn sure don't want to fail. And it just was such a change for me, like going from just tunnel vision of trying to be the best athlete in the world to taking on 40 athletes that have problems with their girlfriends, that can't get up out of bed, that's not going to class. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what do I do? And so it was really something that I really appreciated that I did go through it. It really helped me pull myself out of that, being that self-centered athlete, into, giving your time to people and helping others. So the challenge, it was a great challenge. And we even won in my second year. We won an NCAA championship, and it is still something just didn't feel right, but in year 3, I figured a lot of things out, and it's allowed me to coach the last 29 years.
You've done an amazing job there at Oklahoma State. And I'm going to tell you something I don't think I've ever told you, but early in my head coaching career at Oklahoma State, I bounced a couple of things off you from time to time, but one of the things you told me that stuck with me to this very day, the first time you see an athlete on any given day, so it's 8:30 in the morning, 10 o'clock, 1 o'clock for practice, whatever, the first time you see an athlete, you try to make it the first communication you have with that athlete something on a personal level. You try to talk about their life or ask about their mom or whatever. In other words, they know there's something important to you about them that's outside of their sport. You taught me that. I'll never forget that.
And, I think that we need to, I think that really came from my brother a lot, that always always told me, hey, you need to go fishing. You need to go take care of her. You need to go visit mom. You know, you need to, and all of a sudden it wasn't about wrestling, you know, and just knowing that, that he does care about your mental health, you know, that we care about you, you know, that we know that during this moment, and I would say during my career, you know, mental health is something that's popping up everywhere, right? You know, and real concerns. But in my career, I was mentally healthy, you know, even and I had a chance because I had good people around me that really paid attention and made sure that I was taking care of my mental health, especially during the good times, you know. And I think that's the key, is not always the bad times. It's got to have good mental health during the good times.
Well, thank you for that. That was something I've used my entire career as a head coach. Wish I'd have known it a lot younger, but I guess you don't always have the time frame when you learn things. They just come about. But thank you for teaching me that way back when. I'm glad your brother brought it to your attention. So you're into the coaching career at Oklahoma State. You're doing great. Everything's fine. You're moving on down the road. And then you won 4 consecutive national championships from 2003 to 2006. Kind of hard to imagine how good a stretch that was. You had some amazing, amazing wrestlers. So talk to me about that general era of your coaching career. But I want to specifically get back to one great year and a specific NCAA championship. But go ahead, talk about that era.
Well, it's just an era, you know, where, you know, you had a combination of guys that took wrestling just a little deeper than most, you know, that took it, that lived lives that it was personal to them, you know, and they had an obligation to when they're finished here, that they have some of the things that they wanted in wrestling and college wrestling, you know. And not every athlete has that agenda, you know. They don't come in, they just have a lot of hope. Say, well, I hope I finish somewhere. I hope I'm an All-American one day. I don't know. That's a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But I had some guys like Johnny Hendricks, you know, that was deep rooted in winning, you know, and ended up being the champion in UFC. I mean, went on to another sport and ended up being one of the best in the world at it, you know. So Johnny Hendricks, Edmond, Oklahoma, you know, where you were assistant and head coach in high school, and you know, no different than anyone else, you know. And had some guys like Zach Esposito that came from New Jersey that just lived wrestling, you know. And the thing that was similar to these guys, they were also some of my best students, athletes, academically. I mean, they didn't cut any corners, you know. And so I've got that group together, and including Chris Pendleton and Steve Mocco and Jake Rushholt, you know. Jake Rushholt was from Idaho, came from Oklahoma, ended up being a 3-time national champion, 4-time All-American. And so I just shared this with you because, you know, I always talk to our student athletes, be your best when it's time to be your best, right? I mean, you need to recognize when the most critical events that are really important to you, you know, you need to understand that's when it's time to be your best. And Jake Rushholt lost 27 times and was a 3-time NCAA champion. I mean, the next 3-time national champion that you go to for how many losses would be like 7, you know. And I don't mean at OSU, I mean across the country.
Right.
You know, you're 3-time national champion, you're not losing much, you know. He lost 27 times. And so it tells you about somebody that can be the best when it counts the most. So just had a good group that was really focused and had great ambitions of doing things even beyond winning a national championship.
So that 4-year stretch, in modern wrestling, that's one of the best stretches of wrestling for sure. But I want to talk about 2005. You guys, obviously, you've been undefeated in dual meets several years, but this year you went 21-0. But at the national championship, you had 5 guys win the national title. 5 guys. That's hard to do. I mean, really hard to do. And you guys scored 153 points, 70 points ahead of the runner-up, Michigan. And to me, and you guys also swept the Saturday morning session, if I'm correct. Is that right?
Yes.
You won every match in Saturday morning.
Every match.
So I'm going to compare this performance at the national championship to Tiger Woods winning the U.S. Open by 15. It's the only golf reference I can make that's even close. So talk a little bit about that, and then I want to talk about Steve Mocco as well.
Well, we knew we were good, and I think that prior to that tournament, we had a year that we went undefeated, but it was the way we were winning. It wasn't scratching out wins. It was dominating wins. Guys were taking the responsibility that I don't only want to win, but I want to win by a major decision. A major decisions wrestling is beating somebody by 8 or more points. A decision is winning by 8 or by 7 points or less. And so guys were stepping out and they're like, hey, in the third period in some of these dual meets that we were wrestling, the score might be 6-3. And they're looking at the score and they're asking more out of themselves, and finding a way to turn that match into a 13-3 or 13-5 match and getting a major decision, or picking up a pin. And, it was just a team that was that it allowed me to step back a little bit. And I recognized that they had this chemistry that was driving them to be great, not just win, but be great. And it just allowed me to step back. And I think it was probably the least amount of work I've ever had to do in a season, because these individuals took it by themselves, and they required that in their workouts and practice that you go hard or you're going to get hurt, and just the mentality that just really was fun to be around. I mean, I think maybe you hit it every now and then. I've had it. I've had that mentality, but not as good of athletes, and have won championships with them. But this group was a group that you win half the weight classes. There's 10 weight classes and you win half of them. And when you look at the 5 that won, only 2 of them were ranked number 1 going into the tournament.
That's amazing right there, if nothing else. So Steve Mocco, I mean, you had some great wrestlers, and Zach Esposito is still coaching he's your assistant coach to this day.
Right.
So he's obviously a Cowboy through and through, but Steve Mocco was an intense individual. I remember watching some workouts and just thought, man, this guy, he's angry at something, but he's going, you remember?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Steve Mocco was the hardest working 200 and between 245 and 255 is where his weight was. I've never seen and never will see a man that big work that hard. I don't care what sport it is. Okay. I'm not sure that I've got too many guys that even lightweights that have worked as hard as him. This was the hardest working athlete I've ever seen. My job with Steve most of the time, and my staff, was to try to limit him, slow him down a little bit, because you're so worried about injuries and so worried about just mental health of just keeping things together. I can't. People that are listening to this, you're not going to understand. You just needed to see it, but the guy was incredible. I mean,
I saw it
off
firsthand.
The charts.
Yeah, it was off the charts, and I saw it firsthand. I watched some of those wrestling practices and the workouts, and I was thinking, man, this guy's got a mission. And I know his team drafted off of him. I know that they fed off of that for sure. But they were doing an interview following your national championship victory, which was a ridiculous win. You won by so many. And the guy said, hey, Steve, congratulations on a national championship individual team. You had a perfect season. And Steve looked at him and said, are you kidding? A perfect season would be every player on the team undefeated, unscored upon. that's a perfect season. And I thought,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
Steve's
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
But
That would be Steve.
That would be Steve for sure.
Yeah.
So I remember that. And to me, that's a watershed year in athletics for me personally as a fan, because I remember watching that. And I still listen on the radio to the national championship wrestling in March every year. I still listen to it because it just kind of brings back great memories growing up. And I still remember the Jimmy Williams, the Penn, Dr. Death, Steve Williams back in whatever year that was, 78 or something, and the lights.
78.
78. I still remember that. So my great memories as a kid growing up are watching wrestling matches. Most people wouldn't believe that, but truly loved them. And Steve Mako's comment that day told me all I need to know about that 2005 team. They were perfect, but they could have been more perfect.
Yeah.
So it's hard to coach a team like that very often. That may be a one-time deal, right?
Well, and sometimes, Coach, you don't coach them. You back off. And I was able to back away and just kind of manage individual problems. I think sometimes you jump in and dig too much. You may be interrupting their intensity levels and things like that in our sport, where it is highly intense, and on a daily basis.
Sure. Well, I'm going to ask you a question about athletes, because you and I've been coaching literally longer than you have, because I was a high school coach for 10 years, but athletes,
which we all should, which if I have any regrets, Coach McGraw, is that I didn't start in high school.
Oh man, really? Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. I have. I didn't get that chance. Right. And I don't know. We need more coaches in all sports starting like you did. It's just so important to recognize that you learn a lot about high school athletes, and it's going to be a different thing. They're not on scholarship. Most of them are going to do it till their senior year in high school. And it just gives you a little bit more of a mentality of how you should treat sport. And but anyway, I've always respected guys like you that started in high school and was assistant coach in high school, was a head coach in high school before you took your first job. I think it was UCO.
It was. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that for this reason, because one, that's how I got my start. I had to learn a lot of things on the fly myself that Mike Holder taught me a lot when I worked for him, but I had to learn a lot on my own before that. And when I became a college coach, now I know what's going through those high school kids' minds a little better.
Yeah.
I just coached them. So the athletes have changed, though, a little bit through the years, and maybe it's just time that's changed or whatever. If you could say one thing from a wrestler's athlete standpoint, how the athlete has changed in the last 30 years since you started coaching, just one major change. Doesn't have to be good or bad, just a difference. Is that a hard question?
No, there's just so many things that you'd like to say, but
you can say more than one.
I think in wrestling, I'm going to say this in wrestling, too many of high school wrestlers have individual coaches that they're paying for outside of their wrestling room. And it's affected, I think it's affected a little bit of the mentality. I would say of my recruiting classes every year, I'm going to say 75% of them, their parents spent money on them to help them learn by a tutor, a coach that was paid. And you got to be careful with that. So I don't know if that was the answer you wanted.
Well, that is an answer. It's similar in golf. They all come in with an instructor in golf, and you have to kind of manage that. You have to figure out a way to not step on those toes, but still, help the kid get better while he's here and have a communication. So that's a challenge.
Well, and I think they for me, there's a level of softness that comes with it. Somebody getting paid to teach you something is not going to be on your ass. They don't want to lose their job. But when you come to me, listen, it's a different world. There's responsibility, and And there's a level of intensity that comes in both of our sports, critical moments that we need to see you execute. And if you're not executing, we need to figure out why. Do you need to work harder? You need to do some things. So I think that's it's just, listen, I'm not wanting to hurt your feelings, but listen, you got to be able to take criticism, and be able to use it in a positive way, something you may have never experienced in high school, and so the more I can get that across, and the more my student athletes can embrace that with me and not make it personal, we really get down the road, right?
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think I don't know if the term is softer, but they certainly don't handle the same type of coaching. I mean, you almost have to.
It is softer. The term is softer.
Okay, thank you. All right, it is softer, but there is still a tougher, more resilient guy inside that kid, and
absolutely,
you can bring him out. There's no doubt.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, okay. Any other changes you've noticed in student athlete prospects?
Oh, they're better. What I've noticed, they're better. You guys, the student athlete coming to me now, than when I started recruiting and when I took the job in 1992, these kids are better. You're better. Your skills are better. Your technique's better. You work hard. You're more disciplined. You're a better student in the classroom. I got way better students in the classroom than when I had in 92, and that's just the makeup of wrestling. It's elevated itself academically, where golf has always been there for the most part, but that's the great thing in our sport. We've really elevated ourselves academically since 92 anyway. But my goodness, these guys are good coming in.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The golfers are better now than they were 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And they are great students, obviously still. They treat their bodies different than they used to. They eat better than they used to. I think that's just, it should happen. I think over time, those things should come about. They should be better prepared for what we're doing, I would think. But I agree with you on the softness. We could all be tougher, and definitely the student athlete coming in could be. Okay, one other question for you here. And I'm going to ask you for one thing that you think might make you unique. So do one thing you do as a coach, and if it doesn't make you unique, it makes you successful. But something you do that may be different than a lot of young coaches want to hear from successful coaches about. And this is, you're a wrestling coach, so you're not a golf coach, but all of this crosses over lines right here. In other words, a lot of what you said today would apply to every single golfer. So what do you do as a coach that's really unique, do you think, that could help other young coaches?
I'm highly motivated on when it's time to teach skill. I think as you get older and as you coach longer, teaching becomes less of a priority. Maybe work becomes your priority, running them, lifting them, getting in shape. I stay focused on knowing that for us to have success, we got to see our athletes improve. And the only way you can improve is to stay focused on your skill and technique. And it takes responsibility. It takes time. Teaching skill takes time. It takes real thought. It's not like, okay, we're going to another practice today. It takes organization, of how long am I going to teach? What am I going to teach? And of course, in our sport, you have takedowns, you have defense on your feet, you have to get off bottom. You have to learn how to ride. There's a lot of areas that are just so different from one another that it requires a lot of skill. And I would say for any young coach out there, or coach that's coached for a period of time, don't lose. And listen, it's not the funnest thing I like about coaching, because it's hard, and the more I teach, especially in my 29th year, last year's team was a team that could have finished out of the top 10. And I really believe we coached them to a third place finish. Skill wise, technique wise, we were deficient in a lot of areas that we were able to manage through the season and bounce over some teams. And it was because we were patient in the middle of the season, and we taught. A lot of times you get in your season, you go long, and all of a sudden it's just a matter of practice. How many times you're going to hit the ball? How many times and sometimes I'm that way sometimes. But last year in the middle of the season, even 3/4 of the way in the season, we're still focused on skill and technique because we wasn't there yet.
That's great. That's really good. In golf, actually, Coach McKell and I, my assistant coach, we have done something very similar to that, made that a commitment this year to get back to those skills that we think are important and that we value. We've been doing that with the guys. I think it's helped a lot already, and I think it's going to help going forward. So, okay, I have one other question to ask you before we finish. Thank you again, John, for spending, a little over an hour with me here about your time as an athlete and certainly your time as a coach. But I'm going to ask you, what wrestler you've worked with has gotten the close to mastering the John Smith low single leg? Who's gotten closest?
Oh, I would say Pat Smith. My brother had a different body than mine, but he was, he didn't have some of the flexibility that I was blessed with. He didn't have some of the speed I was blessed with, but all he did was become the first 4-time national champion in the history of our sport. And he did that in 1994 was his 4th championship. He became the first since 1928, where a kid actually wrestled in 4 national championships and won all 4. I would say his mentality reached a level that was required for him to win those tournaments, and he had to battle for all 4 of them. And I'd like to think that, obviously being my younger brother, that he never took things personal, right? I mean, you got an older brother that's training, and he's focused on trying to be the best in the world, which I was doing. And what comes with that is a level of intensity. Sometimes you're getting knocked around, and you're having to be. He was my drill partner a lot of times, and you're doing some things at the age of 16 that most 16-year-olds aren't doing. And so in that process is how you taking it all in. And for him, it was all just about, I'm going to be able to do this one day, rather than fighting it, rather than I'm tired of doing this, he just embraced it. And by embracing it, he went on and did something that I think is as hard as anything that I ever did. And that was be the first guy in the history to win NCAA championships. And the media he got that year going into that last one was so incredible. I mean, it was really an unbelievable experience that I've ever seen, way more than I ever received for anything. Everyone in the United States was trying to get a piece of him because it was something that was going to be done for the first time, and Pat Smith was a remarkable athlete. I mean, it was fun coaching him, and as a brother, man, that was a special time in 1994 for him, but for me too.
That's great. Well, Coach Smith, I want to say thanks again. I'm really looking forward to following you guys wrestling this year, and best of luck for a great season. And we appreciate you coming on Better Than I Found It.
Thanks, Coach McGraw.